Okay, and we're live. This is Deacon Joseph Swaden,
This is Hiram Makina.
and we're doing Orthodox Apologetics live, as we try to do every week, at least once a week, and then maybe twice a week. So let's see here. We are had an interesting topic I wanted to discuss. Because I was it's I called this episode "Back to School" because it's for first couple of weeks of school, and so I was going over my son's homework with him, and he actually had a history lesson which had this creation myth, and I was like, I don't understand why they would put a creation myth in history, but I guess when I started Googling it, I realized that there was like a whole comparative analysis of doing various creation myths where they include like the Iroquois myth, or the Aboriginal myth in Australia, and then they're like, and here's the Hebrew Christian myth, to put them all together, make them all sound like they're a bunch of myths. But so I figured, well, that's an interesting topic for an episode because we got a lot of young people that listen to this, and so I figure, if you ever deal with this stupidity from a professor or a teacher, well, we could discuss it, and why not? Because it's fun. So, what do you think, Father?
I think there's a stark contrast between what the Bible teaches in Genesis 1 and what all the other accounts given in the various pagan religions teach. And
I agree with that.
Yes, and that is simply that in the Bible, in Genesis 1, God creates the universe out of nothing. Whereas in all the other pagan accounts, everything kind of comes out of formless chaotic matter, or that it's assuming everything's already there to begin with. So there's no creation. I mean, to compare, let's say, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. To compare that with the fox, or the what was it? What was the Iroquois one?
The Iroquois one, you have an Earth Mother and Father. The Sky people live in the sky. And then basically one of the Sky Women is going to have birth to twins. So her husband flies into a rage and throws her into a hole, which lands in the middle of an island, which is on the back of a turtle. And basically that becomes North America.
It's already assuming. I mean, we already have Sky people. We got Sky City,
Sky City, landmass. We've got all sorts of created stuff. It's already there. No explanation as to where these things come from.
And is that the same in each of these school? Each of the
no. Well, no. Some of them are very like the Australian Aborigines. That's a sleeping husband and wife, and Dad wakes up Mom. I'm not kidding. This is real. The Father of all spirits says to the Son, Mother, I have work for you. Go down to the earth and wake the sleeping spirits. Give them form.
Go down to the earth.
Yeah, and awake the sleeping spirits. So the spirit's already there. So
the earth is already there.
Yep, the earth is already there. Give them some shapes, and so
it seems like all of these. I mean, what are the other ones?
Let's see. We have the African Bushman creation myth. This one was This doesn't even make sense because it says people did not always live on the surface of the earth. At one time, people and animals lived underneath the earth with Kang, the great master and lord of all life. In this place,
all right. So who is Kang again?
The great master and lord of all life.
Okay.
But anyway, so during this time of bliss, Kang is planning on what he's going to put on top of the earth because right now everyone's underground. So he starts with trees, and then everyone comes out, and they're all climbing out of the hole together. So anyway, so that's I guess you could say the closest you have to a single creator, even though that doesn't actually say that anywhere. Then of course it says Hebrew Christian creation myth, and you click that, and it's Genesis chapters 1 through 3. And then you have the Greek creation myth, which is I think Nyx, which is a bird with black wings. They eventually, I guess, reveal like it's some sort of goddess, and she lays an egg and sits upon this egg for ages. And so the egg cracks, and apparently part of it becomes earth, part of it becomes a spirit, and then the rest of it's Eros, who makes a whole bunch of other people. And they're the Titans.
Even as I recall, in the kind of more philosophical sounding creation accounts you find in some like Hesiod.
Yeah.
And in some of the Egyptian, texts and such, they assume like there's the great chaos, of ocean or great water or the great chaotic matter. Out of that springs forth, out of already existing matter, some deity or something like that. All right.
Yeah. So
But even in that case, even those supposedly more philosophical systems of paganism, they're saying that even their creator god, whoever they say it is springing out of the chaotic matter.
yeah.
As
So
opposed
the god is still, whatever god in question it is always still subject to some sort of superior force of nature.
yes.
And in most cases,
Or let's say in Plato, like I think in Timaeus or some of the other Platonic texts, you have the demiurge, or the closest equivalent, I guess, to God they would have, and then he may be co-eternal, but he's still co-eternal with the formless chaotic matter.
yeah.
All right. So it's only in the biblical account that we find God, who is uncreated, who makes all things out of nothing.
Exactly. And so ultimately that's the main difference you can find between the creation in Genesis, the creation as we know it, and the most of these pagan sort of mythologies. What's it called? Is
Do
that
they
ultimately
in this
they don't
text
create out of nothing. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. There's chaos there, and it's an
in the
energy
text
force.
in the textbook that your son uses? Do they make any attempt to do something like say that how the Hebrew Christian one, as they say, is different, or they just give no commentary whatsoever?
I haven't actually looked at the book itself because I assume that that's probably in school. I mean, I can always ask him sometime, but the point is, I would say that it's more. My guess is it's probably just more like comparison. They don't really make. I don't think they make a distinguishment. I could ask them
Because when you read Genesis 1, I mean, everything is much more grand and majestic. All right, God creates the universe, the heaven and the earth, and then he begins to create on each of the successive days the different things on the earth. He's not fighting with the turtle monster, or he's not fighting with the, I don't know, he's not like Baal fighting with Tiamat in the Babylonian mythology. Then the blood turns into people or something like that. If you see my point, there's none of that stuff going on. It's all an intentional creation.
Well, I guess I asked him, and I guess he said that they were only discussing the Iroquois myth, so they weren't even really doing a comparative analysis. So I have no idea what they're doing.
Huh.
But in any case, all right. So let's look at comments we got so far. Ronald Pacharek wrote a little bit beforehand, and he said he's been reading the canons of the ecumenical and synodical councils recently. 19th century was busy for Orthodox bishops. I'm still digesting the encyclical of the Eastern Patriarchs 1848. OAC, I presume that's us, inspired me to research the canons, whereof I would have been focused on the Church Fathers alone. Acquired ever greater respect for the additional responsibilities of the clergy relative to the laity, and will strive to be an obedient Christian while not burdening clergy with my petty problems. I don't think that the point of the canons is to not burden clergy with petty problems, but in any case, it's okay to burden clergy with petty problems. That's what they're there for. But again, the canons, there's no. I wouldn't say that the fathers wrote the canons, so you can't really separate the church fathers from the canons. They're the canons are part of the church fathers. Rambles writes, hello, and can anyone see this comment? And yes, we can. Hello, Rambles. And so we go on. So what's been interesting in the world of the war zone lately, Father, besides the one Aztec guy or whatever we removed?
Sorry, I don't really follow the war zone as much. Let me look right now.
Okay, well, any general apologetics
My
questions?
computer is very slow, so I have to hold on.
Yeah, we were going to work on it. We didn't get a chance to. But
Okay, so the question someone asked was, how many sacraments does the Orthodox Church have? And besides the 7 sacraments named by the papists?
Yeah.
And the general answer is that I say we do have 7 sacraments, but one of the things is that the 7 sacraments we oftentimes acknowledge as baptism, chrismation, confession, Eucharist, matrimony, holy unction, ordination. Those are sacraments that are needed for the normal functioning of the Christian life. For example, people need to be baptized and chrismated. They need confession, and they need to go to communion. Most people need to be married. They need to have holy unction when they're sick, and ordination to ensure the other sacraments. All right. So I think that's kind of the important point of bringing up the 7. Even the other objects, and throughout sometimes in church history, the other rites and ceremonies that are sometimes called sacraments or mysteries. To some extent, my argument is that they're kind of, to some extent, extensions or elaborations of some of these rites of the church.
Well, I think Saint Dionysius mentions monastic tonsure. I kind of see that as an analog to marriage.
Yeah, well, here's the yeah, exactly. And however, remember though, technically, one doesn't. For example, when a monk makes another monk, for example, I mean, oftentimes a bishop or an abbot of a monastery or who's a priest will give somebody the monastic tonsure and give them the habit. But you don't. Originally, it wasn't like that. I mean, Saint Benedict, for example, he was never ordained a deacon or a priest. All right, but he still made monks. Saint Anthony the Great was only a layperson. All right, I'm not sure if I think a lot like Saint Pachomius. I'm not sure if he was a priest either. All right, so I mean, some of these don't even technically, as long as you all have the schema, you can still make other schema monks, at least technically. All right, I think there was a little discussion we were having on the forum about that. But I mean, for example, you could even count to some extent. Let's say making consecration of a king kind of falls to some extent. Does it fall to some extent among I don't know. Is it's a kind of extent? I mean, is it some form of ordination? I don't really want to go down that route there, but anyway. But that was a question about the seven sacraments. How many this church name?
We just got another question from Rambles. He says, "Does chapter 39 of the Dialogues, book 4 by Saint Gregory the Great support purgatory?"
I have to reread it.
Well, I can send you a link from the Tertullian site. It uses a 1911 translation, which actually uses the word purgatory in it.
Well, I'd have to see the Latin text.
Yeah, because really what it's talking about is, are people purged by fire after their life? He kind of implies not to speculate on it. If you look at it, really, he's just saying that, he's basically like I guess the question would be about whether a person is punished for their sins after death, and it says, "For although these words may be understood of the fire of tribulation which men suffer in this world, yet if any will interpret them of them the fire of purgatory which shall be in the next life, then he must carefully consider that the apostle said, not that he may be saved by fire, that he buildeth upon his foundation iron, brass, or lead, that is the greater sort of sins, and therefore the more hard, and consequently not more remissible in that place, but wood, hay, stubble, that is light and very light sins, which the fire doth easily consume. Yet we have further here to consider that none can be purged, no, not for the least sins that be, unless in his lifetime he deserved by virtuous work to find such favor in that place." So
I'm looking at the Patrologia. I just want to see what word he uses.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like probably the best thing to do. And then we've
Okay,
got
you can go ahead. Do you want to answer the question or give some thought to it while I look for it?
Well, I mean, that's what I was basically doing. Is that he seems to be very loath to interpret it that way, because he seems more interested in qualifying that a person who has even small sins, that their salvation comes from what happened in their time on earth, not what happened, in purgatory. In other words, it's more of a formality of
chapter 30, chapter 39, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. They give the Latin and the Greek text side by side, so that's useful. Okay. Chapter 39 of book 4. Okay, so where's the link to the Tertullian doc?
Well, I have it's in the private chat. You want me to put it in the public chat?
Yeah, put it in the public chat.
Okay, hold on. So this is the quote in question that we're dealing with, and we can take a look at that. And then
there are only 4 books of dialogues, right?
Yes, and this is chapter 39. And then
okay, so what is that? Let me see here. Okay, let me look at the heading. It's chapter 39. Our Lord saith in the Gospel, "Walk while ye have the light." Okay, and Patrologia chapter. Let's see, that's 56. I'm gonna put okay. All right. Okay, so chapter 50, chapter 49. Just having to go up. Now, the Greek text was actually translated by Pope St. Zachary in the 740s from Latin into Greek. So that actually helps some bit, because it tells you, because often St. Zachary may kind of explain a concept in a much clearer way in Greek. Okay, so here we have chapter 39. Okay, so chapter 39. Oh, chapter 38, my mistake. Okay. Oh, wait, whoa. They don't give chapter 39 in the Patrilogia. That's very strange. It skips directly over from chapter 38 to 40.
What?
That's very interesting. And the page numbers aren't any different. Here,
In
let me give
both
you
Latin and Greek?
here. I'm going to give you the link. I'm not logged into YouTube, but I'm going to send you the link. That might tell us that something's interesting going on. That may tell you that the editor thought there was something suspect, possibly about the text. So go to page. I sent you the link there, Father Joseph. You can put it in the
Yeah,
open
I'm
chat.
looking at it right now.
Go to page 395, or on one side, 396 on the other. Folio management.
Give me 1 second.
See, they have chapter 38, XXVIII. I'm not that bad. I don't really recognize the Roman numerals. So chapter 38.
Hold on.
Now let me look. It may be. Let me look again. It may be that they're numbering them differently.
Yeah, because I just saw 19 listed as XVIII. So
I'm seeing X. Okay, if you can find chapter. See, there's chapter 38. Look on again. It would be on the folio numbering of page.
That's 42.
389. Go to 389 folio page numbering.
Hold on. 36. 304. Skips right to 42. What the heck?
I'm going to have to look at this more because apparently there's a question here in their edition.
35. This doesn't make sense. They don't appear to be in order.
You see here. Look. Okay, so look in chapter 40. Chapter 40 on the Patrilogia.
This is actually, you know what? I think this is 37, and it's a misspelling.
No, it can't be, because look, you go to page 104. I mean, this is in the public chat, right? So people can look at the Patrilogia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Hold on, I can put it in there.
Okay. Because if you look on what's given as folio page 395 and then 396 or 104, all right, to the conventional numbering, you can see chapter 40 is concerning the soul of the deacon Pascasius, okay?
Right.
And that's chapter 40 on the Tertullian.org site, okay? Chapter 39 is the one before that, and it says, whether there be any fire of purgatory in the next world. Well, you go up, you continue going up, and you do not find that. They just give you the dialogue about Chrysogonus, Chrysorius, which is who they're talking about in chapter 38. Chrysorius, yeah. So let me look. Let me make sure they didn't do something where they forgot to add the chapter heading. Hold on. Let's see. Okay, because I could be mistaken here. Return, behold the dragon. Okay, against contra Chrysorius. Okay. Our Lord saith in the gospel, walk ye, we have the light.
8.
So apparently there's a I can't really answer the question.
Give me a second here. Hold on. I'll tell you right here. Okay, so we got 38. All right.
Okay, I think what it is actually chapter 38, 39 is actually subsumed as well.
Yeah, in the text.
Yes, I can see some of it now because I can see they're quoting 1 Corinthians.
Yeah, that's why I'm looking for here.
Okay, let me look at the first part where we can find about the word purgatory. Okay.
Okay, that's 38. Hmm.
All right. Do we have any other questions, Father? I mean,
Yeah, we have a few, and
let's
we'll
answer some of
definitely.
those other questions while I go through this.
All right. So let's see. We're gonna get back to Ramble's original question as we continue. Let's see where we are. Good evening, fathers. 3 questions. Can you please explain the origins of the OCA? Do true Orthodox view the MP as graceless? How do you view the old believers? Okay, well, the first question, the OCA basically were originally they were the American Metropolia, which formed kind of in separation from the Church abroad. They were American dioceses of the Russian Church that kind of weren't with anyone, and so they kind of were independent until the 70s, and then they joined the MP, and that's when they became the OCA after they were granted autocephaly. Do true Orthodox view the MP as graceless? I presume most of them do. I assume some of them may have some view that's a little softer. Again, there are even right now there are even MP people who see the MP as graceless in Russia, not in America. How do you view the old believers? I think fathers covered this before. I mean, most of them are heretics, and the few that are not are usually like they're usually in some sort of priesthood group, but
Well,
they've done.
even the priesthood ones, even just to jump in here, even the
Yeah,
priesthood ones have heresies, because they have. How do they explain they have ecclesiological heresies? They can't explain how, in their view, the episcopate of the church could simply cease to be.
yeah.
So, I mean, so we would believe we would say the old believers are basically heretics. Well, even if they claim to have clergy, the problem is that they're claiming the episcopate ceased to exist. Remember when the old believers got an episcopate back in the 1840s from the suspended. I'm sorry, my dog's barking. There's something outside. The suspended Serbian Greek bishop. They like chrismated him to even take him in to them. All right. So do you see my point? That doesn't make a lot of
Yeah.
sense. All right. So either they were just really ignorant, or they had a heretical ecclesiology.
Okay, now this is an interesting thing because okay, I'm taking a look here. I'm back. I wanted to go back to this. I wanted to go back to the text, the Latin text. It doesn't appear to be a separate chapter. It appears to be a continuation of the previous chapter. Um, so it's just kind of treated. Maybe they just didn't label it. Um, but in any case, so let me just see here if I can find it. It would start where Peter would ask the question.
It's right after the part where he starts talking about the dragon.
No, it's missing a page. This version is missing a page. If you look at the folio, 391, 392, and then the next one is 395, 396.
Oh wow. Okay,
So
we got
it's
a
missing
problem
a
there.
page. Yeah, we'll have to find it and then we'll analyze it more carefully. But in any case, let's see here. Verum says hello. So that's what hello, and so in any case, Rambles asks, what is Orthodoxy's view on the atonement? How is it different than penal substitution? Does Orthodoxy hold to the Roman Catholic substitutionary atonement? Um,
What is it? What is the definition of that?
well, I think what he's referring to, penal substitution, is really kind of like that's really kind of started with Anselm of Lucca. And in that sense, it's effectively and quote correct me if I'm wrong, but it takes the question of Christ being a ransom for sin and turns it more into like a literal, like he becomes like a lump sum payment to the Father. So it's kind of a very different. It's a very juridical view, like the Father required this much payment for sin, etc., and the only way it could be done is through the death of His Son. So it's in that sense, it's
Well,
makes God
I don't even think the papists have a dogmatic view on this matter technically, because one can. What do they have actually a dogmatic definition in their organization about this?
I would think that it becomes foundational to the question of things like indulgences, and so because ultimately when we begin reducing salvation to a mathematical equation or even a financial transaction, everything becomes transactional. So I would say that in the sense that Christ paid for our sins, Orthodoxy has no doubt of that. We have no doubt that Christ came for the remission of sins, so on and so forth. But we don't. We would never take it to the extreme that Anselm and later thinkers, especially those who would then cross that bridge over into purgatory and indulgences, did. So, but then again, there are many modern Roman Catholics who say that's not really our views, and they just throw away like 400 or 500 years of their thinkers. So I don't really know what to say about that. Verum Fide asks Hieromonchina, what do you know in regards to the De Trinitate manuscripts and the double eternal procession interpolations?
Okay, hold us. Who's asking me this? Rambles?
That's Rambles, yeah. No, Verum Fide is asking that.
I'd like to find more information about that because the earliest De Trinitate manuscripts were like from the 590s, the late 5th, 6th century.
And they're really hard to get. Didn't you?
No, they're not digital. None of them are digitized. They're kept in the Ambrosian Library in Italy, and they don't digitize any of them. There's there is a 7th century. There's either a 7th century De Trinitate or De Civitate or concerning this or the City of God in Oxford, and that's not even digitized. I mean, they have like 13th century ones where they don't tell you.
Yeah, I find it interesting because they've done so much, scholarly work, quote unquote, on St.
They want money. I think it's some issue where they want you to pay them money for making copies of it. This is what I've come to the conclusion with a lot of these universities. They hoard their manuscripts, even though they could theoretically just take some, bring a scanner in there, like a scanner that doesn't even touch the pages, and they could scan everything. All right, because they bring these books out for scholars upon request on some occasions. All right,
yeah,
but they want to keep it, so you have to go to the university or you have to do all this other stuff.
So it's fundraising. Okay,
I think so. I mean, maybe eventually, but that maybe eventually they'll have it. But I've looked Verum Fide. I mean, I've actually I've done that myself, trying to find the 7th century online versions, and I just can't. They have not scanned them, or they refuse to. Yeah. So you gotta go to the Ambrosiana Biblioteca in Milan and ask them if you are allowed. I think I've sent emails and I've never gotten any reply. And I've asked people who actually live in Italy that I've known if they could go there, and they've never been successful in being allowed to see any of them.
Hey, now Rambles asks, would Orthodoxy agree with what this papist Saint Alphonsus Liguori said on the atonement? Thus, all the wrath of God, which he had conceived against our sins, poured out itself out upon the person of Jesus Christ, and thus we must interpret what the apostle said he was made a curse for us, that is, the object of all the curses deserved by our sins.
Maybe, because it depends upon how they're defining things like the wrath of God.
Yeah.
See, this is the problem. It's like when people will, I'm very cautious about some of these things because simply, providing a quote without any context about their theories about things doesn't tell us much. Because, for example, St. Paul says Christ was made sin for us. Obviously, we don't mean he was made. He took the sins of the world on him. He was the Lamb of God who took the sins of the world upon him. So I'd say, what do they mean by wrath of God?
That's the tricky part of it. We don't want to endorse or attack wording because it's kind of limited. First off, when you say wrath of God, and this is one of the trickiest parts because, Christ did die for our sins. Does this mean that, God the Father, decided I'm going to just, inflict maximum pain on Jesus Christ? I don't think that was his thinking process. I'm not God, so I don't know. But I don't think it was that vengeful. But at the same time, he still was a sacrifice and propitiation for our sins. So, I don't want to go in the other direction either.
I think the best thing to do I'm very cautious about these atonement questions simply because I see so many people go into the opposite direction.
Right, they end up going into
they like, for example, the kind of the point where they're on Anthony Karpovitsky, where they almost completely. I mean, he didn't even go that far, but some people do. Where they begin to say stuff like, the garden, it was the bloody sweat in the garden that was really
enough, yeah.
Exactly. And the cross was simply just a manifestation of the love of God, and that's all it really was. This is why I say is the best thing to do is simply read what, the catechisms, we have actual catechisms, what they say and what the fathers say.
Yeah. And that's all you have to really do and not go further than that.
Yes.
But I wouldn't go so far.
No, I mean, I do think, though, that Vladimir Moss did write a very good book on this subject, and he does give all the viewpoints of the fathers in it. So if you want to find the patristic quotations, about
What
these
you,
matters.
you remember the name of that book? Because he writes.
It's called the Vladimir Moss's book. It's on the dogma. I think. Hold on. I'll put it
on the Dogma of Redemption.
Dogma of Redemption.
Okay.
I know he wrote. I remember because HTM like personally had a condemnation of the book. In fact, if you look on orthodoxyinfo.org, which is an HTM site, it's like concerning Vladimir Moss's views.
Yeah.
So here I'll put, if you can put it in the chat, I think this is basically a very fair and balanced exposition. I'm going to send it to you, Father Joseph, right here in the Facebook chat. I think this is a very fair and balanced view. He goes over, what is a correct view of juridical, what's an incorrect view, exaggerations and all the rest. I think what Vladimir Moss says there is perfectly right, because a lot of times he relies simply on Archbishop Theophan Poltava's teachings on this matter.
Yeah.
And there's also Saint the new martyr, Saint Victor of Gadav, and a few others and such. Anyway.
No, that's fine. Rambles asks, could you post your finding on that supposed purgatory verse in St. Gregory's Dialogues on Discord? I would very much appreciate it. Well, first we have to find the text, because the text is missing from the Pastoralia. So we have to find a different version that has the text. And so we'll do that later in the week, and we'll put it up next week, and then from there we'll talk about that. Let's see here. We have that. That's a link there. Ferrum Fide said there's an 8th century one. I think they have something to hide. It's very possible, but it might just be money. Ramble says, does Orthodoxy believe that Christ's suffering was in place of ours?
Christ died for us.
Yeah, he died for us. So, it's for our sins. So, yeah.
Again, I would recommend reading the book I gave.
Definitely read this book. It's in the YouTube chat. Just click it. Verum says the earliest digitized Trinitate manuscript we have found was from Egerton in the 12th century and doesn't even contain the pages for chapter 15, which contains the double processional text.
Well, that's interesting. Do you have a link to that?
Yeah, because that would be an interesting thing. There's probably a footnote as to why those texts are missing. It's
because remember, it was there was also the 10th century Anglo-Saxon manuscript of the of one of the dialogues, in which where in one of some of the Latin manuscripts they have a filioque reference in it, and in one of these other ones it's like they have no reference to it in it, and then there's some scribe later wrote at filio up above, right? So it's possible. See, even if you look in 12th century texts, even if it's Pasticism, oftentimes you may just simply have honest scholars in some monastery copying things, and they just don't copy stuff that's not in the manuscript. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have people that add stuff. But a lot of times, not all scholars were not all scribes were just people making stuff up. A lot of them just, well, my job is just to copy stuff, and that's all I'm going to do. All right. So anyway.
Okay. Well, if you get a chance to post it, Verum, do that. That'd be good. And so let's see here. What else have we got this time around for discussion?
I got some new books in the mail.
Oh, what'd you get?
I found some used copies of the letters of St. Paulinus of Nola. And St. Paulinus of Nola was an Italian saint. He was St. Augustine kind of knew him. I think he died in 420.
Wasn't St. Paulinus of Nola? Was he involved? That wasn't the one that was involved in the Meletian schism, was it?
No. Well, the original Meletian schism was what happened in Egypt, like in 310 or 320. St. Paulinus was born like in 360 or 354.
Well, I thought that Apollinus was involved in the Meletian schism, but it may have.
No, you're talking about Paulinus of Antioch.
Okay.
And that's not like technically he would have said the Meletian schism, but the Meletian schism he was talking about was St. Meletius. And then now that has to be distinguished from the technical real Meletian schism, which was like this Bishop Meletius in Egypt, like around the year 315, who I guess kind of witnessed schism from the Patriarch of Alexandria. I can't remember if it was the exact reason. I think he claimed people. I'm not exactly. You have to read that they deal with that in the First Ecumenical Council. But this is not the Syrian Paulinus, St. Paulinus. This is in fact St. Paulinus of Nola. He was born in Bordeaux, France. He had been the governor in Campania, a secular governor. And he was made a priest, actually, by the Bishop of Toledo, I think, because he lived in Spain for a little bit.
Okay.
And but his wife, what happened is his wife had a child, and the child died a few days later. And so he and his wife simply decided to take monastic vows. And he eventually was made. I think he originally was like a senator and governor, all this other stuff. So eventually he got married. His child died. He then, after that point, decided to I believe, enter the monastic state, and he was eventually made governor in Nola. And I believe Nola is actually in Campania. But anyway, there's something I got from the mail. I found some 2 used copies on Barnes and Noble of the letters of St. Paulinus Nola, volumes 1 and 2. I haven't read them yet, obviously, so I will read those soon. But anyway, I think you can find a lot of good patristic books if you for relatively cheap prices if you start looking. So,
And I'm
anyway.
trying to decode what Verum sent so that we can get the actual manuscript page, because I guess YouTube wasn't allowing the link.
E-Codis, as it says. Okay, now, Verum, do you have a manuscript page number, actually?
Let me see here. Full display.
See, chapter 15. Okay, now what book of what? Now, so what? Are you talking about chapter 15? Chapter 15 of book 15?
Let me see. Okay, not sure. It's Egerton manuscripts 3721. And let's see here, and then
I think De Trinitate has 15 books in it. So book 15 and chapter 15 are going to be like somewhere like 170, 160. I mean, if you have the actual folio number, that would actually be helpful.
I think it's manuscript 3721, but I don't see the folio number.
No. See, 3721 is the name of the manuscript. It's
Right,
already
that's the
there.
manuscript.
Okay, so what he's saying, what I'm saying is that, do you see? Can you open it up? It says e-codices, and you have at the top kind of this drop down tab, and it gives you numberings of 151 RV RV RV.
Well, I noticed that Senyas wouldn't put up a link to ecodices.unifra.ch. I'm trying to figure out what that is. Give me 1 second.
That's a university. I think that may be the St. Gallen University. I'm not. Anyway.
Hold on. I have to.
Ramble says also, wouldn't God have to be absolutely divine simple, because what else there is relative divine simplicity? Well, I think this is the problem. Is like, what do people mean when they say absolute divine simplicity? I think this is the question. Obviously, when we talk about God, God is beyond absolute. He's beyond our comprehension. So you can say, in a certain sense, God is, yes, absolutely divinely simple. But does that absolute divine simplicity, in the proper sense, not in the Thomistic sense, does it preclude distinction within divinity that doesn't involve composition? And I say yes. At that point, we're having a terminological question. All right.
Okay, now this
My point is that you have to have the correct terminologies. Just for example, when a Thomist says they believe God is simple, does that mean the same thing as when Saint Gregory Palamas says he believes God is simple? All right. So, they both believe God is simple, but one believes the simplicity of God is such that it precludes any kind of distinction, and another believes the simplicity is such that it allows distinction without composition.
Yeah. Okay, now I sent a link in the private chat to what Diakonisa sent, and it appears to be, it appears to be a 12th century version or early 13th century version of De Trinitate, and I'm not sure if these are the same one.
Did she find chapter 15 of book 15?
It's not. Well, no, she didn't. It's just that it's from the beginning of the text. So.
I know, but this is what Verum Fidei posted in the chat, though.
Is it?
Yes, it's the exact same thing he posted in the chat.
Okay, because it looked like a different address. I didn't know that.
But that's no problem. I'm going to have to look through the folio.
Yeah, it'll take a while to read this. But yeah, we'll definitely do that.
For example, this says book quartodecim. Okay, so that's book. So we're book chapter. Okay, quartodecim. That's 14, right? 14 is quartodecim. Hold on, let me look. To find the dialogue issue, I'd actually have to find where's a printed edition of the dialogues in Latin besides the Patrologia.
Yeah,
I mean, there might be a Google version, a Google Books version. But
hold on. I think I might have found it. I think it's 175R. Yeah, okay. Quintum decimum. That's if you go to the page thing on the top, it's 175R. So
175R says quintum decimum. Okay, so that's a chapter heading.
yeah, this is a chapter heading for 15.
Okay, a word. Okay, so this is going to involve much more than actually. I don't really want to sit here and look through this text at the moment. I will do that.
We'll do that, and we will get back. It's
Yeah.
it's more stuff that we will add to the research file, and we'll look at this. Now, keep in mind, this is 12th century, so take it with with a grain of salt. It would be nice if we had the earlier editions, but this is as early as we're going to get for now. And we'll take a look at that.
All right, I think we're kind of wrapping up, Father Joseph, this time. If there aren't any more questions.
Yeah. Okay. Father Mark Template says hello. Hi,
Hello.
Father. And Rambo says, also, wouldn't God have to be absolute divine simplicity? Because what else is there? Relative divine simplicity?
I answered that already.
Oh, you did? Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm
My point was that you can say God is absolutely divinely simple because everything in God is absolute in a sense beyond our comprehension.
But then
But that doesn't mean divine simplicity in the same sense, absolute divine simplicity, even in the same sense of, Thomism. Now, I'm not even sure who began the term absolute divine simplicity. That almost sounds like that's something that came about in the 17th or 19th century.
It bases back to the Actus Purus of Thomas.
No. I understand that, but my point is that they're saying that technically isn't God absolutely divinely simple? Because
I don't even like the argument, because the point is, if we look at God in such a reducible manner, which is what you find that scholastics are always doing, God stops making sense. One could make the argument, if we're going to simplify God to that point, that he's also infinitely complex, because since he's impossible for us to define, you could therefore make the argument that his complexity is beyond our comprehension, just as you could say his simplicity is beyond our comprehension.
Well, the fathers never speak about God as complex, and this is the issue. They always speak about God as simple. But my point is
that's not how you define simplicity.
The simplicity means he's not made up of stuff. He's not made up of parts. But the simplicity of God is not the simplicity of a created being, though. The simplicity of God is an uncreated simplicity. Can you tell me if someone can explain if you can really explain what uncreated simplicity is? Please do.
This is my point.
Exactly. My point is that still the fathers give these terms. They still use these terms, and we have to use them ourselves.
Yes, we do. But we don't have to use terms that were invented by heretics 6 centuries later.
Yeah, but my point is I don't even know if the Thomists invented the term absolute divine.
Well, this is why Rambles followed up with asking, did St. Augustine teach the essence energy distinction? Because most claim that St. Augustine led to the Thomistic ADS, and I don't agree. I do not believe that you can find in the thinking of St. Augustine the rationalistic system that was created by Thomas and the Scholastics. You just can't. It's when we're talking about even St. Augustine, as much as he may define terms in unique ways, one thing that he doesn't seem to have down is a systematic form, which is what scholasticism is. And when I say systematic, I don't mean that there's no system. What I mean is that it's not an axiomatic system. It isn't virtual mathematics of God. That's not how it works. And I don't think St. Augustine or any of the church fathers understood it that way, whereas the scholastics truly did.
Okay.
Verum said, if MF's Law 126 of De Trinitate 8th century is online, such would be interesting. Oh, I agree, if it's online. But it seems that, I know Father Enoch did a lot of searching for this text.
Wait, is this the Oxford University one?
Not sure.
MS Law, that sounds like Cambridge or Oxford. Hold on. Medieval, let me see here. The Bowdoin Library, yeah, that's not Oxford. Yeah, no, they don't. For some reason, I don't know why, but they don't want it scanned. I have no idea, but so.
Okay, well, now Ramble says many trad cats claim that the energies of God would have to be a fourth person of the Trinity if believed. Well,
why?
That just means they're wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. They have to explain why it would be.
Yeah, you have, and that's where it gets to. If you have to deal with a false argument and you have to give it credence, you've already seeded a true one. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to say, well, if you believe in the energies of God, then that's a fourth person of the Trinity. Then you have to explain how. And if you can't explain how, there's no reason to accept it a priori. And I think that this is one of the big mistakes that people make when they're dealing with papists in general, is that there's always this. Well, if you mean this, then you mean this. That logical conclusion never draws. I would say 90% of the time, it's some jump that makes no sense whatsoever. And that's one of them. The energies of God can easily be ascribed to be a property of God. But you can't automatically say, well, that must be another person. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, they're trying to say, I think the papists, or I'm endorsing, but what they're saying is that God is, you cannot say God, if you say God is simple, that means he cannot have real distinction between essence and energies. Therefore, if you allow distinction, you introduce some complexity into God. Therefore, he becomes made up of stuff. Therefore, he becomes kind of like one of the pagan deities. And in fact, this is what commonly accuses Saint Gregory of Palamas. They accuse him of teaching pagan polytheism. And if you read the dialogue of Saint Gregory Palamas with the Barlaamite, he addresses all this stuff over and over again. Yeah. And St. Gregory says, I don't believe God is made up of stuff. I don't believe in composition.
One thing that
God is simple. And he points out that St. Basil the Great says that the essence is simple, the energies.
Father, to be fair, I feel like you give the Tradcats too much credence.
I don't think they may go that far, but I'm saying that's where the argument comes from.
Well, I'd say that you're giving them an argument that frankly they don't deservedly have. I mean, if you're talking about the essence versus the energies of God, one simply has to compare the state of even any object in a different manifestation. What I mean by that is a hand in air. I've used this analogy before versus a hand in water. It's still a hand, but the experiential movement is different. A hand that's outside of water, say in a fish tank, is going to look very different to the fish than it is to a person looking at you outside. So the point is, I'm not trying to, I guess you could say negate.
No, what I'm saying is my point, what I was trying to make is, what was the origin of that claim marking? Okay, then I can say why that's wrong. And that's my point. Is that my point was that Saint Gregory Palamas deals with this over and over again.
Yeah, but they'll just say he's lying.
Well, then they need to simply read Saint Gregory Palamas. If you want to have your own, anyway, I just say.
All I'm saying is that the Diamond Brothers argument. Effectively, there's no point in talking in that sense because it's not honest. And then, Rambles asked, didn't St. John of Damascus create the scholastic method? Absolutely
I don't think
not.
So.
He was a master in forms of rhetoric and Greek dialect.
He did write. Now, the Fount of All Knowledge does have the first section is called Philosophical Chapters. That's true. But, that doesn't necessarily mean, he kind of makes some points, I think, in somewhere where he says that you shouldn't try to make equations between the Aristotelian methods and philosophy and theology, because theology is based upon divine revelation.
Exactly.
It's not based upon some guy just sitting around, let me think this through,
Well, but that's exactly what scholasticism is. And, the fact that they happen to be sitting around and discussing it about God does not make it divine revelation.
Father Mark Timberlake says, always better to be apophatic. Well, I think also their fathers do have cataphatic phrases. So, there's both.
Yeah, I'm not against using cataphatic phrases. I think that there's a good purpose to having apophatic thought, because it helps for us to clarify terms in which we have no legitimate explanation. And this is something that I think is, but that doesn't mean we can't make affirmations about God, and we do all the time. We do in the Psalms.
Ronald Pachioric says Church Fathers mention only three persons. Fourth person is heterodox. That's absolutely true. Orthodox don't believe in a fourth person. This is a papist slander. Verum Fide says Diamond, quote unquote, Diamond Brothers.
Yeah. Oh. We're not gonna. I'm not gonna. We're not gonna. You see, on the one hand, it's like a part of me wants to say, we're not going to, impugn on their sincerity. On the other hand, trying to reach them for a debate when they're saying that no Orthodox would debate them seems to be an exercise in futility. So, in any case, it's just what can you do with that? Let's see here. And so I think that's it for now. I would say, if Rambles, if any Tradcats who would like to argue this fourth person of the Trinity stuff, invite them on, because frankly it's silly. They let them be exposed for their falsehoods. It's better to deal with people who deal with the fathers honestly than to deal with them dishonestly. So anyway,
Now, it's
like I said,
interesting
it's
concerning.
good having you on, and we will research the text that you were looking for. And yeah, that's true. Maurice Pinet won't even debate us. Now I should say this. First off, I have a couple. I have one debate coming, and then we have another debate coming here to our show in November. So the point is, there is a debate with what is his name, William Albrecht of Patristic Pillars. He wants to debate the Immaculate Conception, and the week after that, somebody wants to debate clerical celibacy in the Western Church and in the Latin Rite. So that's something that he wanted to come on our show. So I said, "Oh, sure."
Who is it?
Because
Who is the fellow?
I think he's under the impression that clerical celibacy was absolutely the norm in the West.
Who is this person?
Before the schism, and
Who is this
he may
person?
point to a canon or two that pushed for that, but I don't think he'd have a very.
Who is this person that wants to debate clerical celibacy?
Discussing it, but hey,
who is the person that wants to debate clerical celibacy?
Hello? Oh yeah, I'm here. Okay, you see, I have a headset on to keep the noise from coming out, but I had the wrong one on. Yes, it's classical theist. He will be on.
Okay, I'm confused. Who is the one that wants to debate clerical celibacy?
That's a classical theist on. He's a YouTuber and he wants to go on our show.
Okay.
And he's a Roman Catholic. I don't know if he's a heavy trad cat or anything like that. But in any case, we'll discuss it with him. I'm not,
All right.
Anyway, if there are no more questions, then we will be back. If we're not back in the middle of the week, we'll definitely be back next week. And yeah, a lot's going on. So
all right,
stay in touch. Don't forget, we're okay. Whoa, okay. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and you have a great night. Father, benedicite.
Benedicite.